Uh, right. I think now I'm audible, the students. Please confirm once. Now I think I'm audible. Right? Okay. Dear students, please confirm me once I'm audible at the moment, I suppose. I'm audible at the moment, I suppose, dear students. Yes, thank you, Parimal, Nandini, Raj, Prashik, Shivam, Asmita. Thank you so much. So let's begin our lesson today. Okay, so you can see, dear students, you can keep your mobile phone in landscape mode so that you can see the text properly, right? You can keep your mobile phone in landscape mode so as to see the text properly. Okay, so please do adjust your text accordingly so that please do adjust your text accordingly. Okay, so see the summary first. Tricky, a small dog, is pampered and overfed by his rich mistress. He falls seriously ill and his mistress consults a veterinary surgeon. Does he perform an operation? Does the dog recover? Is the question, right? So Tricky is a small dog in this lesson, and this small dog, that is the pet dog, is pampered. Pampered means given a lot of indulgence, right? The Tricky is given a lot of indulgence and overfed by his rich mistress. Overfed means he is given a lot of food in spite of not having required such food. He is given a lot of food. Okay, excess of food is given to him. That is why overfed by his rich mistress. Then he falls seriously ill and his mistress consults a veterinary surgeon. Veterinary means a doctor who deals with animals is called a veterinary doctor, right? So does he perform an operation? Does the dog recover? So it's a very interesting story, dear students. It's really humorous story as well. At the same time, we've got a lot of lessons to learn also from this lesson. So what we have come to know, Tricky is a small domestic pet, okay, and he is pampered, means given indulgence by his mistress, by his owner, who is a very rich person, rich woman, and as a result of being overfed to Tricky, one day he falls sick, and then a veterinary surgeon was called. Now the question is whether veterinary surgeon is able to perform an operation, and does the dog recover, right? So let's find out. So as the title suggests, a triumph of surgery, it means that surgery became successful. So let's find out what kind of a surgery was it, and or was it at all a surgery, or the doctor took some other method to recover, to heal the dog. Let's find out. Okay, I was really worried about Tricky this time. I had pulled up my car when I saw him in the street with his mistress, and I was shocked at his appearance. He had become hugely fat, like a bloated sausage with a leg at each corner. His eyes, bloodshot and rheumy, stared straight ahead, and his tongue lolled from his jaws. Okay, so here the narrator, it's a first person narrative. How do you know it's a first person narrative? Because the narration starts with I is a first person. Therefore first person narrative is, always remember, first person narrative means the writer himself is the narrator. Okay, whenever you find a story starting with I, that is the first person, always remember that this is a the narrator of the story is the writer himself, right? And it's called first person narrative. Here the narrator says that, narrator describes about Tricky's physical appearance. Now he said, since last time I saw Tricky, this time when I saw, his appearance was totally changed. He's become so overweight, he's become so obese, right? So this is what he is describing in the first stanza, paragraph. He says that his eyes became so bulging, and he's got an appearance which gave the impression of an overweight child. Okay, So everything has become very much overweight. I mean, he's become overweight. Mrs. Pumphrey is the owner of this dog actually. Okay, so when the narrator asked, narrator is a surgeon at the same time. Okay, you always remember that the narrator of the story is the veterinary surgeon himself, right? So Mrs. Pumphrey hastened to explain. When the surgeon or the narrator asked Mrs. Pumphrey about the condition of the dog, she replied, he was so listless. Mr. Harriet, name of the surgeon is Mr. Harriet. So he was so listless, she said. Mr. means he was so very much uncomfortable with his condition, right? He seemed to have no energy. I thought he must be suffering from malnutrition. So now, as the veterinary doctor, that is Mr. Harriet, arrives at the house of Mrs. Pumphrey to examine the dog. Mrs. Pumphrey describes to the surgeon the prevailing condition of Tricky, right? So let's find what does she say. She says he seemed to have no energy. I thought he must be suffering from malnutrition. So I have been giving him some little extra meals to build him up, some malt and cod liver well, and a bowl of Horlicks at night to make him sleep. Nothing much really. So she said she initially thought that Tricky was suffering from malnutrition. As a result, she administered some extra food to him. Okay, some extra food to him, some malt, cod liver well, bowl of Horlicks and all that. Okay, but nothing appeared to have worked for Tricky because his condition remained the same. He still he continued to feel listless, that is uncomfortable. Now the surgeon asked Mrs. Pumphrey, and did you cut down on the sweet things as I told you? Oh, I did for a bit, she replied. I did for a bit, but he seemed to be so weak, I had to relent. See, this is very interesting sentence. I did for a bit, she said, I did for a bit, he seemed to be so weak, I had to relent. As he appeared to be so weak, so I had to again start giving him food. Initially, I did cut down on his sweet intake, but afterwards when I could feel that he was suffering from malnutrition, then I started relenting, means I started again administering him this extra sort of sweet things. He does love cream cakes and chocolates, so I can't bear to refuse him. I looked down again at the little dog. That was the trouble. Tricky's only fault was greed. Okay, he was very greedy. He had never been known to refuse food. He would tackle a meal at any hour of the day or night. And I wondered about all the things Mrs. Pumphrey hadn't mentioned. Okay, are you giving him plenty of exercise? Then he asked her, are you giving him plenty of exercise? Well, he has his little walks with me, as you can see, but Hodgkin, the gardener, has been down with the lumbago, so there has been no ring throwing lately. So Hodgkin is a character who is a gardener, so who is to play with him. So now that he is down with some disease, now Tricky's exercise has come to an end. Okay, exercise has come to an end as the gardener has fallen sick. Next, let us find out. Now, as you can see, this is the surgeon. This is Mrs. Pumphrey, and this is Tricky, the domestic pet. Okay, I tried to sound severe. Now I really mean this. If you don't cut his food right down and give him more exercise, he is going to be really ill. Now, surgeon tells Mrs. Pumphrey that now the condition of Tricky is very serious. Therefore, you got to cut down on his meals, right? If you don't cut down on his food right now and give him some exercise, he is going to be certainly ill. You must harden your heart and keep him on a very strict diet. Okay, you need to keep him, you need to cut down on his diet, means you need to control his diet, otherwise it will be very difficult for Tricky to recover. Mrs. Pumphrey wrung her hands. Oh, I will, Mr. Harriet. I am sure you are right, but it is so difficult, so very difficult. She got off, head down along the road, as if determined to put the new regime into practice immediately. Then, like when Mr. Harriet suggested her to cut down on the food of the dog, she became a little bit surprised. Why surprised? Because she is not in the habit of cutting down. She thought that if I cut down on the food intake of Tricky, then he might become the victim of malnutrition. That is why she became slightly uncomfortable when the doctor suggested. But she said, okay, I am sure you are right, but it is so difficult. So very difficult for Mrs. Pumphrey to cut down on the calorie intake of Tricky. She set off, head down along the road, as if determined to put the new regime into practice. Regime means here the practice of cutting down on the diet. Okay, practice of cutting down on the diet is what is the new regime referred to here. New regime, as if determined to put the new regime into practice immediately. Okay, she felt very much uncomfortable, but actually she will not follow the advice given by doctor, but she was showing in front of doctor as if she was determined to implement the advice that doctor has just given to her. I watched their progress with growing concern. Tricky was tottering along in his little tweed coat. He had a whole wardrobe of these coats for the cold weather and a raincoat for the wet days. He struggled on, drooping in his harness. I thought it wouldn't be long before I heard from Mrs. Pumphrey. The expected call came within a few days. Mrs. Pumphrey was distraught. Okay, now the narrator says that the surgeon says that he was watching their progress with growing concern, because the narrator, that is the surgeon, also somehow thought that Mrs. Pumphrey's new regime is something what is not going to be implemented, right? Therefore, he was watching with growing concern. Then Tricky's condition did not improve because Tricky was tottering along in his little tweed coat, and as Tricky is so pampered pet, therefore Tricky has been given a lot of dress, actually winter dresses, summer dresses, rainy dresses. He has many sets of dresses, right? Now let's find out what is the condition of Tricky. The expected call came within a few days. Okay, as Tricky's condition became worse, instead of recovering, his condition became still deteriorated or worse. Then a call came to the narrator once again, to the surgeon once again. Mrs. Pumphrey was distraught. She was very much restless. She became tired. Tricky would eat nothing, refused even his favorite dishes, and besides he had bouts of vomiting. So Tricky's complaints was he was not eating anything, he was refusing all kinds of favorite dishes, and then he was having occasional bout of vomiting also. He spent all his time lying on a rug panting. Okay, he was not only was the fact that he stopped eating, but also he was panting very heavily. He was taking irregular breaths, and he was lying on a rug. He was not active. Okay, so that is what has added extra concern to Mrs. Pumphrey, and that is exactly the reason why she called the surgeon. He spent all his time lying on a rug, panting, didn't want to go for walks, didn't want to do anything. I had made my plans in advance. The only way was to get Tricky out of the house for a period. I suggested that he be hospitalized for about a fortnight to be kept under observation. Okay, so the surgeon suggested Mrs. Pumphrey to hospitalize Tricky for about a fortnight. Fortnight means a period of 15 days, so that he is kept under observation for a period of 15 days. This is what he suggested to the owner of the pet, owner of Tricky, that is Mrs. Pumphrey. The poor lady almost became unconscious. Soon means unconscious. She was sure he would pine and die if he did not see her every day, because there was a lot of emotional attachment between Mrs. Pumphrey and Tricky. Therefore, she thought if Tricky was not able to see me on an everyday basis, he would certainly feel more restless. But I took a firm line. Tricky was very ill, and this was the only way to save him. In fact, I thought it best to take him without delay, and followed by Mrs. Pumphrey's wailings. Okay, then but he became very firm. The narrator, the surgeon, became very firm. Okay, because Tricky was very ill, and this is the only way to save him, because if he is not hospitalized according to the doctor, then Tricky cannot be recovered, right? That is why somehow he managed to urge Mrs. Pumphrey, insisted Mrs. Pumphrey to hospitalize him, to leave Tricky in the custody of the surgeon, to leave Tricky with the surgeon, right? I marched out to the car carrying the little dog wrapped in a blanket. Then he came and collected. Okay, the surgeon came to Mrs. Pumphrey's house and collected the dog in a blanket. The entire staff was roused, and maids rushed in and out, bringing his day bed, his night bed. See, he's so pampered. How do you know he was so pampered? See, he was having his day bed, then he was having his night bed, favorite cushions, then he was having toys and rubber rings, breakfast bowl, lunch bowl, supper bowl. Okay, all this he was having. He had separate arrangements for breakfast, dinner, lunch, everything. Realizing that my car would never hold all the stuff, I started to drive away. Okay, the surgeon saw that so many accessories are there, so many stuff had to be carried. Entire staff was after Tricky, and so many things were being kept inside the car. So when he thought that his car is small enough for all this stuff, then he just left, asking Mrs. Pumphrey to drop the dog in her own car. Okay, realizing that my car would never hold all the stuff, I started to drive away. As I moved up, Mrs. Pumphrey with a despairing cry threw an armful of the little coats through the window. I looked in the mirror before I turned the corner of the drive. Everybody was in tears. Everybody felt so emotionally choked that they started crying now that Tricky was given admission in the hospital. Okay, and that now that everyone had to leave for a few days without Tricky, so everybody became choked with emotion. They started shedding tears, right? Out on the road, I glanced down at the pathetic little animal gasping on the seat by my side. I patted the head, and Tricky made a brave effort to wag his tail. Poor old lad, I said, you haven't a kick in you, but I think I know a cure for you. Means you don't have energy in you. Okay, kick in you matlab you don't have enough energy in you, because he examined Tricky. He was really very sick at that time, but the surgeon had some trick for him, and he said, I shall certainly cure you. Okay, and then okay, you see this. At the surgery, the household dogs searched around him. Tricky looked down at the noisy pack with dull eyes, and when put down, lay motionless on the carpet. The other dogs, after snipping round him for a few seconds, decided he was an uninteresting object and ignored him. Other dogs were also there in the hospital, the surgeon's house. Therefore, all the dogs ignored him because he was lying, he was not moving, and he was not playing. I made up a bed for him in a warm loose box next to the one where the other dogs slept. For 2 days I kept an eye on him, giving him no food but plenty of water. Okay, for 2 days surgeon did not administer or give any food to him, just water. At the end of the second day he started to show some interest in his surroundings, and on the third day he began to whimper when he heard the dogs in the yard. Okay, whimper means to make a sort of sound. When I opened the door, Tricky trotted out and was immediately engulfed by Joe, the greyhound, and his friends. After rolling him over and thoroughly inspecting him, the dogs moved off down the garden. Tricky followed them, rolling slightly with his surplus fat. Okay, so now after 3 days, Tricky seemed to have improved a lot. He started playing with other dogs in the house, right? Other dogs in the house, so, and started moving also. So dear students, we shall stop here. From this particular pink mark we will start our lesson tomorrow. Okay, we shall conclude our lesson tomorrow itself. Okay, so dear students, that's it for the day. That's it for the day till we meet the next day, that is tomorrow. Bye bye, take care and have a nice day. I am signing off, dear students, but your attendance is left, right? So please do wait just 1 minute, dear students, just 1 minute, just 1 minute. I'm sending you attendance. Just a minute. In the meantime, in the meantime, you do one thing. You just read these few lines. Just read these few lines. This 2 paragraphs you read in the meantime, dear students, right? And I shall keep your attendance ready. Is it okay? Better. No, let me do one thing. Okay, dear students, let me do one thing. You can sign off now. What I'll do is I will send you on Google Classroom today. So in the Google Classroom, you please give your attendance today. Okay, today please give your attendance, because I have got another class now. Therefore, I don't want to waste even 2 minutes. So therefore, all of you please sign off now and sign out now, and tomorrow please give your attendance in the Google Sheet. After I upload your attendance on Google Sheet, I shall let you know. On group WhatsApp, and you immediately go to Google Classroom and give your attendance. Right? Bye bye. Take care and have a nice day, dear students.